Hidden in plain sight. When MLM began to explode in the U.S. in the early 1960s, corresponding with Amway's debut, the larger phenomenon of religious, political, self-help, and philosophical cults in America was also growing. The new cult phenomenon was not hiding. Solicitations, public displays, and strange costumes made encounters with some cults almost unavoidable in major cities. MLM solicitations were also entering daily life, disguised as house parties, huge motivation rallies, home-based opportunity presentations, and disguised social invitations. For all their strange new manifestations, cults were hardly recognized as a significant phenomenon until some exploded into horrifying violence. Infamous cults that gained public attention only when they self-destructed included the Branch Davidians, a religious sect started in 1959 and ended in fire and death in 1993 in Waco, Texas. The Heaven's Gate cult started in the 70s and ended with a mass suicide in 1997. The People's Temple, founded by Jim Jones, moved to California in the 1960s with thousands of followers. It ended in 1978 with a mass suicide and murder of 900 of its members in Guyana and the murder of a U.S. congressman. Cult presence was noted occasionally in media reports of strange spectacles, including zombie-like behavior or extreme expressions of loyalty or near worship of leaders. Whistleblower reports occasionally made it into public awareness, telling of abusive persuasion methods and sexual exploitation of members by the self-appointed leaders. In 1973, the Unification Church, Moonies, claimed several thousand members in America. The Hare Krishna movement, founded in the mid-60s, had 50 centers in the U.S. by the 1990s, the largest with 500 members. Much larger groups that have been popularly described as cults include Scientology, Transcendental Meditation, and followers of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. A 1978 New York Times article, quote, "Investigating Cults," described a state of national confusion. Despite tragedies such as the Jonestown murder and suicides, it noted the obstacles to remedial action of First Amendment rights, the puzzle of determining exercise of free will versus coercion, and the outward similarities of cults to some legal organizations, especially some churches or the military. Obstacles notwithstanding, the article acknowledged the plain reality that if cults can operate unhindered, there is no law against cults, then society, quote, may fear for its safety. The capability of cults to, quote, compromise an individual's psychological integrity leads to, quote, deceptive recruitment, fraudulent fundraising, and violence. 20 years later, the Washington Post provided a special series, The Cult Controversy, Spiritual Quest or Mind Control, reviewing the status of understanding over the previous 50 years, a period coinciding with MLM's development. The series focused on two of the earlier organizations identified in the 1950s as cults, the Unification Church, Moonies, and Scientology. It showed how by the 1990s, cults had increased in size and manifested terrifying capacity for harm, citing the sarin gas attack by a cult on the Tokyo subway. In that shocking incident in 1995, cult leader Shoko Asahara, an admirer of Adolf Hitler, and members of his Buddhist cult were accused of releasing a lethal nerve gas on the crowded Tokyo subway. Investigations revealed the cult had secretly developed a global network of front companies to make chemical and biological weapons. Investigators determined the group had as many as 60,000 members in Japan and thousands more in Russia. Academic study of cults has been based mostly on the work of just two researchers and writers, Robert J. Lifton and Margaret Singer. Their seminal works on the defining traits of cults are part of studies of mind control, also referred to as brainwashing or thought reform. The behavior of American POWs during and after the Korean War provided some of the early field research material for harmful persuasion methods. There is no consensus as to why the cultic organizations in religion, politics, therapies, and other fields, including MLM, emerged in the 1960s and 70s and have grown and proliferated since. Cults defy precise classification. The phenomenon of sudden personality changes among its members, irrational loyalty, and acceptance of delusional claims of cult leaders remains mysterious. Two writers, Fran Conway and Joe Siegelman, are among the few dedicated to exploring the phenomenon. They coined the term snapping to describe the often sudden and extreme change that comes over otherwise ordinary people who become enmeshed in cultic organizations. In the 2011 update of their 1979 book, Snapping, America's Epidemic of Sudden Personality Change, they acknowledge that the cult phenomenon and its dangerous methods of persuasion have spread into most areas of the culture, including commercial sales, noting that cults in these areas were inconceivable only a few years before. A frequently quoted 15-point checklist of the defining characteristics of cults was included in the book Take Back Your Life, Recovering from Cults and Abusive Relationships by Janja Lalich and Madeline Tobias. Among these hallmark characteristics are, quote, the group is elitist, claiming a special, exalted status for itself, its leaders, and members. And the group has a polarized us versus them mentality, which may cause conflict with the wider society. These classic traits are ever present in MLM, where founders and upliners are exalted for possessing secrets to success and serving as living role models for perfect marriages, higher morality, and American patriotism. Adherents are told they hold membership in a special community of winners. Those who criticize or question the movement are vilified as pathetic losers. Academic studies of multi-level marketing cults are virtually non-existent, though the cult elements of MLM are frequently referenced in media in recognition of disturbing cultic behavior of MLM recruits and hallmark cult tactics observed at MLM spectacles. In 2009, British newspaper The Guardian published an article on cults by cult expert Rick A. Ross, who has worked with MLM cult members. Citing the findings of Lifton and Singer, Ross identified three main characteristics of a cult. When these characteristics are understood and applied to MLM, the quote business disguise falls away and MLM's true identity begins to reveal itself. The first is the role of MLM leaders that Ross described as, quote, objects of worship. Unlike real business leaders, the MLM founder or upliner is unaccountable, holding sole and total authority. They present themselves as the, quote, source of the group's power and success, while failures are always shifted to lower-level individuals. The so-called education in MLM is coercive, presented as dogma, beyond question, and requires actions, in the case of MLM, that cause social and financial loss to the members while enriching the leaders. Finally, and perhaps as a consequence of the warped power relationships, cults are known for extreme exploitation, including sexual and financial, of vulnerable members. Steve Hassan, an American cult expert and author of The Cult of Trump, a book that argues Donald Trump is a cult leader using classic cult persuasion methods, has publicly referenced and discussed MLMs and assisted MLM victims in gaining their freedom. Among the thought control evidence he cites is the use by cults of, quote, loaded language and cliches, thought-stopping techniques to prevent critical analysis. Hassan's website, Freedom of Mind, has a page dedicated to MLM, entitled Multi-Level Marketing Groups Defraud Consumers. He describes MLMs as commercial cults. Like all cults, initial solicitations by MLM are deceptive and manipulative, disguising the nature of the organization and the recruiter's true purposes. Hassan cites a key feature that further separates MLM from real business, which is based on measurable market facts and data. In MLM, belief, not objective reality, is presented as the basis for success. Total belief is said to result in spectacular rewards, and failures are attributed to loss or weakness of faith. Quote, doubt and critical thinking become false. Hassan and Ross are part of a small, sometimes controversial group called Cult Exit Counselors. They specialize in helping individuals regain their freedom from cults, including MLMs. The number of people involved in MLMs that have been served by this group is insignificant relative to the scale of need, but they are the only people addressing this need directly and professionally on an individual basis. Rick Ross's book, Cults Inside Out, includes a chapter entitled Amway Intervention that provides useful guidance for anyone seeking reconnection with friends or family members entrapped in an MLM cult. The chapter recounts Ross's experience helping a college student whose life took a downturn after being recruited into Amway, and the family saw him as, quote, obsessed. The family hired Ross to help them reach their son as their own efforts had failed. Ross's session with the student continued over 3 days. Reflecting that MLM cult members have been separated from objective reality and their personal histories, he advises connecting in some way with the MLM victim's past. Quote, this may stimulate memories that can be recalled and reinforced as a pathway back to reality and core identity. The only writer to directly and extensively address multi-level marketing as a large-scale cult movement is English activist David Breyer. He is not published, nor is he an academic or psychologist, and he does not provide professional counseling for pay to victims as Ross and Hassan do. Unlike Hassan, Breyer was never in a cult, but Breyer's work is available online on his remarkable blog that reports more than 1.5 million views. He is frequently consulted by the news media. Breyer's blog, MLM, The American Dream Made Nightmare, was inspired by a profoundly and tragically disruptive experience within his own family involving Amway. This led to years of inquiry and the formulation of a precise understanding of the MLM phenomenon, which he characterizes as a, quote, cultic racket and a, quote, ritual belief system. Breyer's unique contribution is in identifying MLM's actual and true identity, the core reality almost uniformly avoided or missed by the news media that refer to MLM in its disguise as a, quote, direct selling business. Using Lifton's defining characteristics of thought reform cults, Breyer characterizes MLMs as authoritarian, delusional, and fascistic in character, and therefore a threat not just to individuals, but whole nations. While MLM's goals are seemingly limited to ill-gotten financial gains from victims, and MLMs appear disparate and uncoordinated, he reminds readers how National Socialism, the Nazi Party, was similarly dismissed in its formative stages as marginal and unthreatening. Treating MLM as an insidious and disruptive cultural force, Breyer's writing often addresses social and national harms, such as Herbalife using at least $25 million to bribe Chinese officials and then covering it up with accounting maneuvers. The dangerously false claims of some MLMs for COVID-19 cures or preventions, or how MLMs can infiltrate and distort other areas of society, citing Amway's Betsy DeVos' extraordinary power over American schools. Breyer begins his own list of cult characteristics with, quote, deception. He notes that the very first encounter people have with MLM is deeply deceptive, signaling sinister manipulations and potentially disastrous consequences. MLM recruiters deviously misrepresent the recruiting solicitation as a purely social contact or as a product-oriented demonstration. Additionally, Breyer addresses another hallmark trait of MLM, almost universally ignored by the media and academia, the factor of mystification. He cites the common practice of portraying the MLM as a, quote, breakthrough, making extraordinary financial results possible beyond what any other business could. The, quote, infinite levels and the myriad of ranks and titles are misrepresented to give the organization a status of an ancient religion or secret society. Mystification separates the recruits from verifiable reality and draws them into MLM pioneer Glenn Turner's fairy tale world where, quote, everything is possible. All cult experts agree that virtually everyone is a potential cult member, and social forces supporting cult recruiting affect almost everyone. Nevertheless, the enduring popular perception is that cult victims are limited to peculiarly vulnerable individuals facing unusual circumstances. Most people, therefore, believe they themselves would not be cult candidates, or if they were solicited, would never succumb. As experts Hassan and Ross attest, even people inside cults believe they would not join one and deny they are in a cult. Cults are therefore protected by the denial and disbelief of people inside them and out. The enslaving power that cult persuasion can have over minds, anyone's mind, remains largely unstudied or ignored, aiding the spread of cults. The largest cult in the world.